And on the 12th day of Crouch, Miss My True Love gave to me. All right, sing everybody, and not a delay. Yeah, that's right. Welcome to 275 of Tactical Crouch. It's NA. We did China, we did Korea. Now we're singing Christmas carols with two special guests. We have Kenobi and we have Connecticut Heurix. Welcome.
We're still doing that, huh? It's on my Wikipedia.
That's the only. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. That's the only reason why I remembered about that. I was just like, that's so funny. I need to bring that back.
I don't remember who put it on my Wikipedia. It's right at the bottom in like the trivia thing.
Yep.
I don't remember who did that, but
shout outs to whoever added that because that's brilliant. That's
I wonder if they did it on purpose or if they were just like, oh, it's a CT in front. It's got to be from Connecticut.
Part of me thinks it was Lemon. Like a very large part of me
could be true. That could be true.
Because she's on, if you look at the revision history on my Wikipedia page, she's on there like a couple times. So she's being a little devious behind the scenes, I feel like.
Hitting a devious lick. Yiska?
Yeah?
How long have you been awake?
Pretty long, but not long enough to have the roster transfer window cancel on me.
Shorter or longer than 18 and a half hours? That's where I'm at right now.
It's a specific number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the clock is right there, so it's easy to do the quick math. You know?
Yeah, though, like, I guess practicing, even though, like, I think by A times it comes out at pretty normal, you know, European times, I think 9 a.m. I could, like, cruise into my workday based on that. But, yeah, I don't know, like, I think if by the chance that this releases before the window either is delayed or opened, from what I know, it's much more likely that we're actually getting it now and that things are happening. I think the Dallas vs. Shock thing is an indication for that, because otherwise, if you have so many unsigned players, who do you play if you have nobody in that contract, right?
Like everybody's handshaked.
I mean, you could also like even have the players play that are already like handshake agreements on other teams, right? And aren't on your roster anymore. But from my information, I think everyone on Dallas was let go after the season. So technically,
public.
Everyone
tweeted that.
Right. Everyone else has been re-signed, and then of course you would have to clearly, you know, outline, okay, X, Y, and Z player are actually on our team, and then these players aren't, and we're still negotiating or whatever. Or by that time, you know, for instance, Atlanta Reign has already announced that Philanchi are signing. Right. I don't know, like, how it will go, but yeah, knock on wood, I think this is probably 65% chance that we're getting it this time.
Very good. Shit I like to hear. But this is Contenders. We're talking crazy shit. We're talking Cjay and Vega. We're talking simple. We're talking how the hell did Redbirds win? We're talking who is good and who is not so good from North America. And we have two experts on the show. But before we dive into that, and maybe even some World Cup talk, we need to thank the patrons. Shout out to our patron producers: Avril, Vista, Bebe, Battlecry, Briefine Bean, Bronzebot, Boohow, Picasso, Creasar 34444, Kasha 67, Lotion, Porkchop Sammy, Rex Sane, Stuck in Bronze, and YouTube members: I Sam Jello, William Jess, Vishmam, Fire Element 6, AK Chris R, Brother, Stuck in Bronze, Samuel Esparza, Adam L, and Sagi Fumi. Brother Kenobi.
I'm not on the bottom right this time.
True. Brother on the bottom left. Hit me with a potential World Cup team. The World Cup is coming back. 2023. No, not for China.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
This is North America, boy.
Well, okay. The question then becomes is it going to be OWL talent or is it like Contenders talent?
Let's stick with Contenders.
Okay.
Hit me with a gold medal winning back-to-back World Cup champions.
No? Age restrictions or no?
Yes, good.
Because if there's no age restrictions, I put Tree in like immediately.
Did we have age restrictions in the past? I don't remember.
No, I don't think
been forever.
Leaf played.
Yeah, no, okay, so no age restrictions. Then.
Okay,
so we have Tree.
So Cjay-Vega, I think go. Vega, I mean, I think Cjay should probably be an OWL by the time World Cup happens, but just for posterity, we'll do this. I think Cjay-Vega. I think For DPS, Tree and Vision.
Okay.
And then for tank, probably I'm gonna say Gig because I like Gig a lot, but I think probably Rhino would be like if you wanted to like. I think Rhino would probably be like the person who I would put in there.
Okay.
So that would be my
Heurix?
5.
Any
For-
adjustments?
For USA specifically, you're talking
Yes,
about?
specifically for US.
Contenders based
Yeah.
USA
Yeah.
team.
Like we're phoning it in. We haven't hit like the super team. You know,
We're
we
not
gotta.
getting American Tornado. Is
Yeah,
basically what you're telling me right there.
Yeah, just stick to contenders. No age restrictions.
Oh, if you're telling me no Atlanta Academy, no American Tornado, we're just I'm not sure we're going to the grand finals. I was thinking. But you never know. I don't know if you can make too many changes to that. There's definitely some names that I think could be interesting. Like, I would definitely throw Lep's name into the mix into that. If you consider him contenders right now. I mean, he did just play and run it back. There's a couple of DPS you could throw into the mix there as well, maybe.
Sugar free.
He's an owl
he's-
player. Come
he's an
on.
owl.
Yeah. Which player?
Well,
team
I
has-
mean, no, that's true. That's true. That's true. Technically speaking, he still has yet to debut.
right.
Yeah.
That's true. I mix him up with Speedily. I don't
There's
know why.
definitely a couple of tanks I would throw
Yeah.
in there. I think tank is probably like the biggest question mark in my
I
mind.
agree.
Because there's a lot of tanks that I think I would consider to be up there, like Rhino Vulcan. I think either one of those you'd be good with. Gig
take
with the
both,
performance,
too.
especially that he's had lately, I think you'd be very fine with him going as well. In certain metas, Strider would be a really interesting
ball meta.
option.
Ball meta against Strider.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of interesting players, but I think that's kind of like this is kind of the same situation that we get into when we opened contenders back in
Right.
A sides. What was it, June, I believe, where it was like, okay, there's a big vacuum right now because a lot of the top talent moved up, and a lot of this year was dissecting, okay, who's left, who's new, and all that kind of stuff. And I think we're still kind of in the phase of figuring out who's who at this stage, even though we've seen them through 3 tournament stages. It still kind of feels like that. There's definitely been some questions answered, but I don't know if we have like an AT just yet, kind of thing.
Okay.
Even though Odyssey has been great, Redbirds, they've been doing Redbird things. You know what I mean?
Very true. Very true.
Not gonna lie, if you tell me that your, first line NA contenders, NA player tank would be Gig, I'm concerned for the level of play. Or
Okay, but here's the thing.
Yeah, okay,
Have you seen Gig this year? Because
He's
that's
so good.
that's
Yeah?
the thing.
Okay.
I actually talked to their staff. I think it was back in A sides, if I'm not mistaken. And Kenobi probably feels the same way. We've had like a pretty good relationship with the Redbird staff for quite some time, even dating back to last year, when they first started getting it like very heavily into the contenders side of things. That staff works very, very diligently to make sure that first of all they find the really great talent, and in some cases talent that people aren't really aware of, and in some cases even talent that we're not as aware of. And they're really good at molding that talent. And something that has happened that I've seen, at least with Gig, is that they've taken what was genuinely a pretty solid player before. I think he's hit an entirely different level. And anybody that sits here and wants to say like, oh, Gig this, Gig that, I think completely cast away whatever opinion you may have and watch his tape now.
Okay.
Because I don't think that you can have like as negative of an opinion of Gig now as maybe some would have had in the past, whatever that may be. I mean, I think he's a very solid tank.
How far
genuinely.
is he away from Rhino then?
How far is
I
he
mean-
away from Rhino?
Rhino.
Reiner.
Oh, Reiner.
I mean-
I rate Reiner very, 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 very highly personally. I did going into this season. I would say there's definitely still some strides he would have to make to hit Reiner's level personally, especially with regards to depth in his hero pool. Reiner just for some reason could play everything. But what Gig does play, he plays very well. And even some of the things that he's had to kind of like fall into with regards to like Junker Queen and that kind of stuff, where generally you would see like the off tank playing that kind of stuff. Gig performed really well on that. We know he's got a pretty decent ball. All the stuff that he's supposed to be playing, he plays really well. And especially given the fact that he doesn't have that kind of like off tank to support as much, you would expect that like aggressive playstyle that Gig to have to kind of in some cases become problematic. It really hasn't been a problem at all for Redbird. They've actually used that as a tool. They've like weaponized Gig in a way that has made him, I would say, he has become a problem for everybody else because dealing with Gig is now a difficulty for teams. Genuinely has become a problem for a lot of teams trying to dissect, okay, how can we deal with Gig before he kills like 2 or 3 of our players? And then of course Redbird also has those DPS players that just very hard to match right now in NA.
I think the other thing about Gig is like when we were casting kind of like the back end of the tournament, it was like he would always be least deaths in the lobby, which like for Gig, like historically, like I imagine that like is something that we're not used to being with Gig, right?
No, I mean I think most like League fans remember him as he was on Valiant and kind of was just like the Ryan Run It Down guy.
Which he's not anymore, and I think that speaks to how the staff have like made him grow as like a player, but also his ability, like because they did change how they played like halfway through the end of Run It Back, where they like started playing like a lot slower, because there were times where like Gig against Timeless in that series, and like I think it was winter semis, where like he would do the classic Gig thing where he's jumping in 300 health, no bubble, no cooldowns, and he just like insta dies, right? There are some of those, but like his ability to, I think, progressively learn a hero to like the best of the ability of that hero in that meta, I think is definitely something that like has made him really valuable to Redbirds, because it feels like now I wouldn't be as worried about like him needing to pick up like a Zarya, because I feel like he'd struggle probably a little bit at the start, but then like you could have him towards the back end of a season probably be one of the better players on.
So you kind of trust him with like a new hero, like you give him a Ramatra and you're like, okay, like I think you get adjust to it eventually. Like you might struggle of it like at the start, but you'd come around.
Kind of like how Fate was with Ball, where it was like Fate like at the start of Ball was like really bad, and then like eventually got like to be one of the best.
Quite good. Yeah.
I feel like Gig could probably make that happen with how he's been able to progressively get better at a hero.
Okay.
One thing I will say in defense, just in case, again, I feel like with regards to Gig specifically, people that I have talked to have generally had a lesser opinion of him than I hold personally. So just in defense of him, I will say 2 things. A, I don't think that he's really had, and I don't mean this as like a knock to what Kenobi is saying. I think this is probably what he means as well. I don't think he's had any of those moments where it's like, oh wow, that looks not good, and then he gets better. He hasn't been at a low stage at any point with any of the new heroes or anything like that. And he's always started off as, oh, he's good, and then he became better. And then second to that is, I don't know about this personally, but I hear from a lot of teammates, people that play around him, and then also his staff, that he's really built up himself personally as well behind the scenes, really big leadership role on that team. And I think that factors into how I rate him personally as well, because I think that those kinds of qualities go a very, very long way on rosters. The ability to kind of mesh into a team and become part of a whole rather than just an individual in a system, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I like and support that. And you should too. If you like teammates over individual players, not subtweeting anybody here, you should let us know in the comments below on who's right and who's wrong. All I'm saying is that maybe there's something to that, and maybe there's something in the water. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. The lore title for me is in the water.
I mean,
hey, listen, I'm undefeated in Lord bets. I don't want to hear.
Every time we interview someone that's on like one of those crazy winning teams like EXO, or like any of these teams that are just dominant, Odyssey for a long time was as well, and even Redbird. Every time we ask them, like, what's the one thing, like, is it like a coach, or is it like this, or is it that? And every single time it's just like, look, we're just friends, we're having a good time, we love it, like we all get along, we like, everybody puts in what they need to put in and everything. I mean, just being a team is like the biggest thing. Okay.
Listen, Yiska is unknowingly blue lock pilled, and if anybody gets that reference, then shout outs to you. Okay.
I certainly don't.
Now, you definitely don't, but you'd vibe with it. I think you get the message, and you're riding high on that. Heurix, you didn't sound entirely too confident in the shot that this hypothetical NA World Cup team has. Does it clear France?
Why?
Well,
I don't need to be reminded of it. That's not fair.
I actually there's two things about that.
Okay.
If there's an actual NA team, can they clear France? I think so. I think they can. But I think that there's going to be a lot of teams that people don't expect to actually be very, very, very good. Come time for Overwatch World Cup, that are genuinely going to be top contenders that you shouldn't be surprised if they make it to a grand final, like at all. I think the Danish team is one that I think is like already underrated because people aren't talking about them being like a potential top 5 team.
Sure.
Like they need to be considered probably a top 5 team depending on how other stuff shakes out. I mean, I'm a little bit ahead of myself, I think, to a degree, because I haven't looked at every single country. We don't even know every single country yet. But yeah, there's a couple of teams out there where you start looking around at, contenders and Overwatch League where players are coming from. You can like scroll down on Wikipedia and see all the countries and everything that everybody represents. Yeah. And there are some teams out there that people, I think, need to be a little bit cognizant of going into this, because there are going to be some ones flying under the radar. I think there already are.
True.
That, see, like the question then you have to answer is like, would the 5th best Korean squad you could assemble, would they drop a map?
Okay.
Listen, bro. You're talking to
Okay, the 5th best would drop because we already saw the 3rd team. I don't think they're in the tournament anymore. They lost to like HLXC, I think, in Pacific Showdown. Yeah. So let's move that bar up a little bit, Yiska.
Wait, what? Okay, are we talking about like
Apex Showdown?
Are we contenders locked still?
That's the question.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. If we're that's the thing that we
if we're owl locked,
we don't know yet. If we're owl locked, then like I mean it's probably a Korea angle.
It depends on who you send. You saw what happened last year, or last time.
Last time, yeah, they just. Well, I mean, okay, if they don't send proper, then they don't care. I guess is how I would probably view that. Is like proper probably has no reason to not be on that team if they're not like contenders locked. Even if they are contenders locked, the thing about it is that like Heesang's not going to be there anymore. Max isn't going to be there anymore. Bliss isn't going to be there anymore. So it's like Simprissa is like you got to reset if you're Korea and you're two contenders.
I really hope it's contenders locked, because
it would be fun.
I would hate.
I'm not sure that it would be.
They should do what they do with World Cup or Olympics.
For all of this prep and like scrimming and like pre-selection, for all of this to take place during the season. And I promise you, every head coach would hate that shit as well.
Yeah. You get voted in, you're just like, damn it, I gotta manage my team, and I gotta manage my World Cup team, and it's just like
it's not even for the coach, but like I don't want my star player to not take the time to rest
doubling up
while everyone else is resting scrimming my scrims to run that stuff, right? Like, and it will be unequal amounts of load, right? Like in terms of the amount of practice going out. So I think contenders is probably the better solution. And then if it actually then happens after the season, it's also once again a great advertisement tool for that fresh talent, right?
Yeah. You start building out some really cool storylines. It's something that I think people really latched onto when it was going on, like 2019 and prior. That, people really drew names. It's like, why do I remember Dragon Eddie? Well, because he was in the World Cup. Like, there are so many like really obscure names and people that like you discover as fans through, being exposed.
Patty
sure.
Really like
that. I mean, you talk about like the story of Mickey, staying in Thailand. It's just like, you wouldn't have that if the World Cup doesn't exist. And it's, I agree. I think it's about exploring talent. I think it's probably logistically, for the time being, probably best if we were to keep it to contenders. Maybe we skim on the old age we don't worry too much about that. So we can get people like Tree and, like you said, Leave, and we can get like the Hesangs and all these crazy, youngsters coming in and representing their country and, getting that spotlight. I think that's super, super cool. And I'm excited to see it back. I think a lot of people are, and it sounds like I don't know, maybe Turkey's got a shot. I think Lethal's pretty good. Yeah. I don't know.
Are there any other Turkish players?
I don't know.
Like
That's a question for you.
One. He's like the only one, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, come on.
I think there was there was Riverboat, I think back in like 2018, who was also Turkish. But I don't know if they're playing anymore.
Wasn't there also what was his name? Mete or whatever? That was like from way back in the day, played on Bazooka Puppies.
Oh
Right,
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we're already searching back
was he
that
Turkish?
far.
I think he was. I like vaguely recall
Might
that.
have been. I think that there was like some other people. I don't really see that flag too much on Wikipedia though.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to do. Going, wasn't there that guy from like 5 years ago?
You don't remember that really obscure?
I mean, I dropped a
Puppies
Riverboat fucking reference.
Hey, listen, if you remember Bazooka Puppies and Laser Kittens and 1, 2, 3, maybe you should download the podcast. It would really help us a lot. And if you can't support us monetarily, that would be one way you could do that.
They also had a private jet sponsorship.
They did. Shout out to whoever remembers that. I know somebody does. I don't know if they listen to this though. So yes, World Cup's happening. It's really exciting. These guys definitely are likely to be involved in spreading the gospel, cheering on USA whenever that happens. I did see some PR information out there that I don't think is, I don't know. Look for it if you're interested. World Cup fans, there's stuff out there for you. But jumping into NA contenders as I clap my microphone. Sorry, audio listeners. We had a crazy final that I didn't entirely catch all of, but I did watch the semis, and I have some questions about that. Odyssey, the crazy Olympians, they're, reigning supreme. They didn't win. What happened? What give? Boys?
So if you were to ask Redbirds, who are the champions, Redbirds, when we interviewed Gig at the Redbirds won. When we interviewed Gig after the finals were over, first off, Gig, to be fair to him, we talked to him on the semifinals day, and Gig goes in the interview, and I think it's one of the coolest things that we had. He says, "Guys, all I'm gonna say to you is that I'm gonna be back here talking to you after grand final." And I thought that was like one of the coolest things that I've ever heard. Especially because he made it happen. I think that was like Chad energy from Gig.
Shout out.
But when
calling the shots, yeah.
When we asked him at the end, because he could be a little less coy with us, and he didn't have to really hide strats or anything. He said that the reason that they won is because they made a swap during the tournament in not only their playstyle, but they swapped Lethal from Reaper onto Sojourn. And he kept telling us that the reason that they lost to Odyssey in B-sides was because Odyssey had a very long time to download and rod read their composition. So their thought process was they had this other wrinkle in their composition that they didn't want to bring out until they very deeply had to, and in losers bracket. And they did it with 3 days before they were going to play Odyssey in the grand finals. So Odyssey was scrambling.
There's an asterisk here, by the way. There is a large asterisk here. So Vision and Lethal swapping roles that's happened. They've played around with that earlier on already. And I think that they were pretty successful. We've seen Vision do well on both sides of that role swap. We've seen Lethal do really well on both sides of that role swap. I remember Dor and I actually made mention of it at one point in our cast that it was interesting that they make that swap when you would say in most realities, the only time you see a team make those swaps is one side is doing poorly. But that was never the case. One side was never doing poorly. It was never a question of, Vision isn't good on Sojourn. Because
I mean, they would.
That's what it seemed like. But then the other thing with that is that I had heard coming out of week 2. So this was either during or just after the conclusion of Homecoming, which was right before we had the final days. I had heard that Redbird swapped up their not their comp, but the way that they were playing
Mhm.
and that they were just dicing teams in scrims,
Yep.
like just absolutely dicing everyone. And I had heard that one of the teams that they diced was Odyssey, and I was like, well, we did our Preds like 4 days ago, so I know I'm screwed on that one. But yeah, I know that that's something that they had done a couple of times. So like while this was something that probably caught Odyssey like major off guard, it was something that like Redbird has kind of played with this. So this wasn't like just
Not completely unheard.
completely
No, yeah,
out
yeah.
of the
They
blue.
would, they
Okay.
would, they would put
Yeah.
lethal on Sojourn to like when they would play specifically on route. They would do a lot of the time where they would just like flex lethal onto Sojourn, and then they would
Okay.
put vision on Hanzo. So like they would run double hit scan
Sure.
or double long range a lot of the time.
Mhm.
But it was a lot like most of the time as like a unit they would run lethal's Reaper and then Vision's Sojourn,
Mhm.
and then at like I think it was loser semi or somewhere around like the last week they would say they made the swap like where it was like permanently switched between the
Okay.
two, and lethal I think gets lethal. I mean, to be fair, lethal's Reaper is very good. Like I don't want to discredit him, and I think Vision's Sojourn was also really good, but I think Vision's Sojourn
Vision
got
Clutch King, man.
absolutely.
We'll get to
unreal.
him.
He
I've
did.
heard
He
some
did.
things.
I think when they played Timeless, I think Vision did look a little bit mortal, especially against Arrow. I think that was a matchup that was really hard for them to get value out of. And then I think that when they went to the losers bracket, Lethal, comes in to Sojourn, where I think for a player like Lethal, while
Mhm.
Reaper is like a very important to like the meta and like you need to be a very good Reaper, and he was putting up disgusting stats on Reaper that like I wasn't seeing anyone else do. I
Mhm.
think when you put lethal on something that has like that much more autonomy in the composition, like a Sojourn, where you just have this ability to, I think, be a little bit more impactful,
Okay.
I think that definitely helped them as well. Vision's also, Gig told us this, Vision's like the smartest Reaper that I think was in NA contenders, and that was off of like, they had it obviously planned and scrimmed a little bit, but Vision comes in and plays Reaper like one of the best Reapers that we probably had, which is wild to me that like
You
we
know
got
what's-
to a position.
It's
Yeah, go
it's
ahead.
interesting because we don't have a lot of like Reaper players,
No.
if
We
that makes
don't.
sense. Like we had really good Reaper play coming in from people who just don't play Reaper. Like I remember Snozler had some really good moments. That's a Tracer player.
Yeah.
Like came in as like a Tracer player,
Yeah.
and then
Right.
he was like pretty solid on. Or, I mean, even better than that, I would say on Reaper. We don't have like in NA.
Doomed was good. Doomed was really good also on Reaper.
In
I think
NA,
was
if you're looking for a Sombra or a Reaper, generally speaking, look somewhere else.
Okay.
But we did have some good moments. I think Vision and Snozler were the ones that just peeked out to me most immediately.
Mm.
But they weren't the only ones.
So,
But anyways, yeah, sorry to cut you off.
just to stay a little bit on lethal, what do I have to imagine like this guy's hero pool to be like generally?
I don't know if he has.
A to Z, buddy.
Yeah, everything. It's everything.
At this point, yeah, it's A to Z. It genuinely feels like that.
Like, does it fit the archetype of this like this new age like hit scan that can play your Ashe, your Widow, your Sojourn, and then have that Tracer in your back pocket as well?
I mean, he's also bringing out Cassidy. Like he played
Okay.
everything. Like he played a lot during. I think not only this tournament, but also back in. I mean, B-Sides was a little bit finicky because it was a lot of Genji and like Genji range
Sure.
a lot of the time. But like this tournament, he did play like a lot of different things. Like he showed the Sojourn, very good. Showed the Reaper, probably the statistically best Reaper we had, just by numbers that we would see in the stats.
Okay.
And then the Cassidy as well. He can play Tracer. I know that from back in the day. So like, Heurix is right. It's basically everything at this point. I don't think there's like a hero that I would look at for lethal and be like, I'm a bit worried about how they would play this. I think that there's probably not really a hero that's like a weakness for him, I would say.
Let me flip that for you, Heurix. When it comes to like Overwatch League caliber picks that you would trust lethal on to compare with, the Happies of the world, or the maybe Decay is an unfair example, but like to be able to compete with some of the best that Owl has to offer, what would you say that lethal's hero pool is? Not necessarily of what he has played, but like what would you trust him to play on like an Owl stage and succeed?
I still think I really do think that with lethal, you
Okay.
still go A to Z and you take things off. rather
Sure.
than the opposite.
Okay.
So instead of like going, oh, like this pick, this pick, this pick, this pick, I would say assume A to Z and then maybe remove a couple of picks because we just aren't really sure.
Okay.
I mean, I may be ignorant on this one, but I would say, based off of just my own knowledge of Lethal, I would say I'm not sure about like, okay, if he had to play like a tank swap like Dante setup, like
Sure.
how would that Doomfist look? Yeah, I don't know, because typically I think it was Tap that played it when Lethal was playing with Tap, if I'm not mistaken.
That was on Harrisburg.
Yeah, so I wouldn't know about that, but then again, that's a tank, so who cares? Beyond that, I mean, I wouldn't have any question marks, like any like, you know, alerts going off in my head or anything like that if you pulled out really anything, because I'm running through it in my mind right now. It's like he would be fine on Torb, he'd be fine on Mei, I think. Genji is solid, all of the hit scans great. Tracer I would have no problems.
Sombra would be like the one where it's probably like that one needs to be
but that's
like,
just because
it's Sombra.
It's
like,
very tough to find a Sombra in the West in general.
Sure.
Like just straight up. There's a couple who have like picked it up and have been okay. But if you compare them to some of the like Korean counterparts and even some of the players in China that play it, it's hard for me to say that they hold a candle. They might. I just haven't seen it personally.
Sure. That's fair.
Outside of a few names that are already in Overwatch League, obviously.
True. So Redbirds coming in, battling, I think, you know, you want to talk about quite the story, you know, finishing second in their group, having a rough time in the upper bracket, losing they get knocked out by Timeless to lower bracket. They have to, you know, beat Timeless in the lower bracket final, which I'm gonna have to press you guys about Timeless because I have some opinions that I'm interested to hear your takes on. And then obviously, you know, the big question was, you know, if anybody can beat Odyssey, and you know, they only take a map. I know Liquipedia says 2, but that's just because somebody doesn't know how to write rules. So, you know, is the tree factor eliminated? Is it, you know, the way that Redbirds switched things up? Like, what do you guys necessarily kind of attribute this Redbird resurgence to be? You know, if you had to pick one thing, what would it be?
I mean, I think that the swap obviously, I think, helped to an extent, where I think like Lethal, like going, like he's played the Sojourn before, but like going specifically to that, I think definitely helped the team because, like I said, I think in terms of like being important, your best player should probably be playing the best thing in like the meta, right? And I think that while Vision is like very good on Sojourn, I think Lethal is like kind of a different beast on it. And to be fair to Vision, also he played probably the best Reaper throughout the rest of the tournament that we had. But I think also on top of that, we have to circle back to Gig a little bit, because I think Gig's Winston was fucking unreal, like during finals. I think like when I watched, every single time Tree was like trying to do something, and like every single moment that there was like Tree is maybe vulnerable to like 75% health, what they would do is they would just send Gig and Liar onto Tree, and then he just insta-die. And like that like shot calling and that ability to have Gig just like be that kind of like initiating factor and just put so much pressure onto Tree. I think they knew kind of like the Tree factor was a thing, and the rest of Odyssey is very good in their own right? They don't get to this point just having only Tree as like their main factor. But every time that there were a lot of these like engagements that were starting in the neutral, they would see Tree. If Tree is in a position where we can take kind of a gamble somewhat and get onto him, pressure him out, force out cooldowns, even if we don't get the kill, if he's not in the fight, then we have a much better chance of winning.
And would you feel confident, or maybe even do you know for sure that like Gig is like that big vocal presence that are making, you know, some of these decisions to like get in the face of that star player?
Well, their DPS don't talk.
Okay, so there you go. It's probably got to be somebody then.
To be fair, I think another thing that they changed was like going from week 2 to week 3 in the finals is that when we did talk to them beforehand, even in like collegiate, like when Homecoming, when Heurix and I would talk to Redbirds, they would be like, yeah, our DPS kind of just go off and do their own thing. Like they kind of just like Liar said it's taken years off his life whenever he's playing with Vision and Lethal.
We hear a lot of times the let them cook strategy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's come up a few times.
There's like a Doug Collins quote where he's like, "What was your final play with Michael Jordan?" It was just give Jordan the ball, get the fuck out of the way. That's kind of how it was a lot of the time with Redbirds. But as we got like through the tournament, and even we heard this from Gig at the end of it, where Gig was like, "Yeah, we started like communicating a lot more as a team. Like we really started to like talk a little bit more. We started to communicate as a unit, and I think that really helped because the two teams that I think on the other side that were like Timeless, it looked like Timeless just kind of like were overwhelmed by the team coordination of this Redbird esports team moving as a unit. And I think it definitely showed in their play, like how they evolved from their loss to Timeless to coming back to beat Timeless pretty convincingly. And then I would say convincingly beat Odyssey, even though it shows 4-2 on the scoreboard.
Sure. Heurix, for you, any bright and shining points that, paints Redbirds as the potential last champions of 2020? I guess 10 days out of the year, I guess probably was safe to say the last champions of 2022.
Yeah. The other thing,
surprise contenders tournament.
If there was another contenders tournament, I would hope that I would be in contract negotiations.
Yeah.
At this point, and I'm not. So either I'm left out or some, I don't know. But Redbirds. I think Kenobi pretty much hit on everything. I think the things that definitely everybody would shine a light on them for, certainly it starts with Vision and Lethal, in my opinion. But everything about that roster really came together well. I think Renko also coming back, having spent some time all over the place, even with Dire Wolves out in Contenders Australia.
Damn.
Being able to come back and come into this roster and be able to perform, because that's the thing. This roster did have a very different backline, just a couple of months ago. To just put and install in two totally different players into this system, it makes it easier when you're going into a brand new meta. Everybody's kind of starting fresh, at least with regards to that, coming away from the Junker Queen meta. But even that, it's still a lot to ask a team to go ahead and just install a new backline, or install a new support line, rather, I guess you should say. But everything came together really well for Redbird, and I think that those supports need a little bit more credit too, because we spend a lot of time talking about Vision, Lethal, and Gig, but realistically, Liar and Renko did a lot there as well.
Fair play. Yiska, any names that you want to kind of start with on the list in your mental palace? Any names popping up?
Not really.
Quiz the.
Not
really. All right. Well, thanks for the show. 275.
It was a short one. Let's go.
Okay. The thing is, if I too targetedly ask questions, then it's
okay.
What do you know about XYZ player who I know has already been picked up by friends?
I'll softball you this. You like Ultraviolet and OG, yeah? Yiska, you think those guys are pretty all right?
Sure.
Pretty solid. Now, doing a little bit of homework, doing a little light research, there are two names from the support column, if I'm hopefully remembering this correctly, that sound like they could be inheriting this duo synergy, and that's Cjay and Vega. Am I wrong in saying that, you guys? Is this an improper narrative that maybe this duo isn't necessarily the package deal that UV and OG were, but maybe they are, maybe they aren't? What do you guys think?
I'll let Kenobi take, and then I'll maybe throw a harsh disagreement on it. Who knows?
I would say that the thing about Vega and Cjay is they do work together really well, and they play together really well. And I would consider them probably to be the best support duo that we have, just power level wise, based on especially their success this year, because they were on Wisp, and then after Rack and Luke Mino went from Odyssey to Owl, Odyssey was just okay, let's just get the other two best support duo that we have in Contenders. So Cjay, I've been quite a fan of for a while. I think that he's cut from cutting from the cloth of like Ojee and Ultraviolet is very difficult because those
Okay.
two were like almost transcendental in like how good they were.
Mhm.
Like not even as a duo, but like as individuals. I think Cjay is very good, and I think Cjay is probably deserving of being an owl now.
Okay.
Just by how he's played so far, what I know him for, even back in like when he's played on Northwood some of these times. Like I think that Cjay is one of those players that could come out. Now, in terms of like the duo aspect between him and Vega, don't necessarily think it's like the same thing as like Ultraviolet
Okay.
and Ojee. Those two like want to play with each other, right? And I bet they're totally fine Cjay and Vega continuing to play each other, but I don't think it's like a necessarily a thing where it's like we need both of them at the same time, right? I think you
Okay.
can get either or, and they'd be totally fine
Mm.
like with those two. I think that so the narrative of like them being like the best support duo, right? Like that is something that I would like consider to be
Sure.
close. But as for them like moving up together, don't really think it's as necessary as it felt like it was with like Ultraviolet and Ojee.
Okay. Heurix?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they're definitely I would say the best support duo. There's a little bit of reluctance in my voice, if you can tell, because I do think that like Redbirds would be mad if we said that.
Because they did win, so I mean
Timeless would also be mad if
They
we
would-
said that. But yeah, I think CJ is probably one of the best players in the region, just straight up, regardless of role.
Okay.
I think without a doubt he should be moving to Overwatch League if scouts are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Then that should happen. I think there's a few main supports that are like in Run It Back that are all more or less in the same level.
Okay.
Some can, take a stride above one of the others or all of the others at times, and it just depends on how things go. We've seen great stuff from Lep, again, asterisk there,
Yep.
kind of an owl player already. So it's hard to qualify him in that state when like he probably should just be going back into the league regardless. But
Yep.
it is what it is. Vega there, obviously. I think we have a lot of good things to say. It's main support, liar, rank.
He's also-
It's
Sure.
like
Yeah.
they're both. It's like where are we at with either of them?
Vega's also 16, so he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and
anytime
that's
soon.
another thing there too.
Fair.
Aspen, who wasn't in Contenders but was in Calling All Heroes, which I think the crazy thing about NA that people need to understand is that it's not one tournament series. We
Sure.
have Contenders, we have Collegiate, and now we also have Calling All Heroes, which isn't, I guess technically Calling All Heroes isn't technically NA, or is it? I don't think so. But I mean, given the fact that it's not like this is a North American tournament, but like,
Yeah, it's
but
based
I
on-
think when we talk about the different pipelines for Overwatch League to develop talent
Mhm.
through, I think you would at least talk about those three together.
Sure.
A lot of them go hand in hand. And Aspen coming out of Calling Our Heroes slash Contenders slash everything is another one that's in there. Needs to be thrown into that mix, I think, as well. But yeah, I think CJ definitely warrants it. Vega could definitely warrant it as well. They're probably the best support line. Though when we compare it, just to kind of bring this back to what we were
Sure.
talking about before, when we compare CJ and Vega, I don't think that they, at least in my brain currently, they really hold a candle to what Ojee and Ultraviolet were / are. Because I don't know if I've told this story. Maybe I've told you guys like privately. There was a mock tryout that Coach John held last year. And it was like between seasons, and he brought in a bunch of like Contenders talent from EU, from NA, even a couple from Korea, like even someone was in there. And we got a really good look at like a lot of the talent that we inevitably saw this past season in Overwatch League. A lot of the talent that you saw, wind up getting tons of players of the match and tons of opportunity. Like a lot of that stuff happened. Even a lot of the players right now that are, not of age, but they got involved in the tryouts anyways, just for something to do, just to get that opportunity and see what that was like. There was a couple of moments where there was OG paired with UV, and regardless of who was on the other team, like they could have stacked the other team. Every time that those two were paired together, it ruined the lobby. Like I don't know how else to explain this. Like it literally ruined the game. It made it unwinnable for the other team. For some reason, like their ability personally with their mechanics, also their synergy, their ability to kind of play off of each other, and on top of that, like I think the presence that they have with one another, like the confidence that they share when they have each other there, it was like a massive difference maker. And it like I have never heard that happen, and I don't know if I would expect to see the same thing happen with CJ and Vega. I think those are two are incredible players, but like OG and UV were on a different level, I think, going into this past season.
Okay.
That I'm not sure that people really understood going into it, because they were on an entirely different plane of existence. It was insane.
Yeah, and definitely remember hearing that story and was blown away by, you know, how visceral it sounded, where they had to like gentleman agreement to like try to separate them as best they could, because it just wasn't apparently all that fair.
Gotta handshake it.
But listening to like some of the what little Contenders content is out there, primarily basically the episode of Plat Chat that, you know, highlighted as much Contenders as they could. CJ and Vega seemed like this new duo that was kind of coming up, and I thought it was kind of interesting to hear like how that would reflect against such a popular Western duo that was so hyped up.
It's definitely hard to have those types of storylines come out, because we also had a lot of time to see OG and UV. And they had time to develop what became kind of a dynasty between the two of them, and amongst others, obviously. I think if we had more time with Odyssey, CJ and Vega could probably do that, perhaps, and dependent upon, you know, the team's outlook as a whole, because they also have to contend with what is now potentially a rivalry with Redbird, or maybe even Timeless comes back. But this was a weird year, I think, for us to develop storylines like that. Like, oh my God, they're like kings and unbeatable outside of like EXO and O2. But yeah, I think they would have been two of the closer ones to crest that if given the opportunity. CJ and Vega, definitely very solid players.
Now, it's interesting you bring up Timeless, because the match that I did sink my teeth into a little bit was that lower bracket final, and there has been a name that has been circulating around NA Contenders.
Should be a few on this team.
Definitely a few. But one of them that I was kind of surprised by, and not a nice way, I'll say it that way, was Kuffa. So I need to know, was that just like a poor performance? Was this maybe uncharacteristic? What's your opinion on Kuffa? Because what I saw from that like final was that like Gig was like head and shoulders better. The team looked more cohesive, and Kuffa was kind of just like eating it a little bit. Just a bad day at the office?
I think go ahead.
All I'm gonna say is that with tanks, their performance is indicative of the team's performance. So if Timeless is getting dominated, Kuffa's probably not having a great time.
Yes.
100%.
And I'm sure Gig would feel the exact same way. If Redbirds is getting dominated, Gig probably isn't feeling too good either. So it goes both ways. I will say that, but Kenobi can go, and we can talk more about Kuffa just in general. But that game in particular, I would say Timeless, if they're getting pooped on, Kuffa's probably getting pooped on.
That one felt like team diff mostly. Okay. Like that one, the semifinal or the lower final felt a lot like team diff. Just like I didn't think Timeless ever got their footing underneath themselves, which is weird because in the previous matchup that they had in winners semis, Kuffa I think Kuffa looked pretty good. Like it was a very close series between the two. I think Redbirds are probably kicking themselves that they didn't win that one, but I think like if you go back and look at that series, that's probably more indicative of like the Kuffa that I would be like say would be
better
like
representation.
The product of like that's a better representation. Because Heurix is right. If it's just like if it's team diff and it's just like completely just like a wash, then it's like it's kind of hard to ever
Sure,
perform
of
as
course.
especially with Winston, where it's like you have to play pretty perfectly in this meta
Agreed.
to like have value. So I think that like that was a series that was like Timeless just as a whole, I think just had a really bad day.
Okay.
But going back to that other series, I think Kuffa played pretty well in the Monkey. He was, I think, a lot of the times matching Gig in a lot of the scenarios where like
Sure.
Winston was important. I think he was getting a lot of value with Primal. His mechanics, I think, on the Winston looked pretty good. Also have to remind, he is playing on ping. It is a thing.
Okay.
So he does have that, notch
That's
under
fair,
against him. But
Most
like
of that team is playing on ping.
that is
True.
true.
Yeah.
also.
When you look at that roster, it's just like, I don't know how you guys. This is actually pretty
They're
crazy.
timeless because they're on 200 ping, just like back in time.
This is not like
but
200 ms from 2 years ago, but they're
Yeah.
like halfway there.
Mhm.
it's hard. It's hard. And I mean, I think for Timeless and talking about them in like general, it was just like their goal as like being a team was like created to beat Odyssey, right? It was
Sure.
like that was what they wanted to do. And I think that they got their chance, and then they got rolled over by Odyssey in winners finals. That it was not close at all, and then they didn't even make it to the rematch. So I think that like there were a lot of like good moments for Timeless. I think throughout Arrow looks still, I think, phenomenal.
Sure.
As like one of the
Yeah.
Doomed is someone who I was not expecting to be as good of a Reaper as they were, and still like performed pretty well. And I think that when you look at this team, if they do like continue, I think that it would be, I would like to see them, because I think that they might need like a little bit more time in the oven as like a unit together, because they were only together for this tournament. It was kind of just like throw all of these really good players together and let's see if we can take down Timeless, which it managed to work up until they got or take down Odyssey rather. It worked like pretty well. They were 9-1 top of their group. They beat Redbirds, and then they got to their final goal and just unfortunately fell short. But I think that if they were to continue like with this team going into next year, if all the if we were to line up where they could stay together, I would actually be looking forward to seeing this team.
Okay. As a whole, speaking on him, and his resume, I don't think it's completely outlandish to, I think enough people talk about him in a positive light, that one representation, one game out of a million doesn't sour an entire, career. So where do you think he shines? Who do you think, like, what's like the ideal meta for Kuffa? Is there like maybe a hero pool that you can kind of establish him for? Where, is he Overwatch League ready? Do you think that's the case, Kenobi?
Overwatch League, I mean, Winston isn't like a bad meta for Kuffa, I don't think.
Okay.
I think Kuffa's
That's
like
probably his best.
Yeah, I would say that was his best. His Junker Queen did look good, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, really good.
So I think that this was like a meta where, with how good Timeless played throughout most of it, I think that this was like probably the perfect meta for him almost. And I think that there was just that one game that really hindered a pretty good performance from him throughout the entirety of the year. Is he owl ready? I'm sure that there are tanks that I can think of in Overwatch League that I would be like, yeah, sure, let's give Kuffa a shot. I definitely think that there's a possibility where you can throw Kuffa in to like a situation where it's like, hey, we need someone, and the current tank that we have isn't working out too well, and maybe we don't have like, we can't go get Smurf or we can't go get someone.
Sure.
I think Kuffa is definitely, you could throw him into Overwatch League, and I wouldn't really be too like worried about it.
Okay.
See, I think there's a certain bias to what I think Gig might already be an edge case. And I think, honestly, like, that might just be preferential treatment because visas are cheap. No visas means no money spent on visa, right? For a guy that doesn't have a North American visa and probably doesn't exceed the level of many, hard to justify, I feel like. I see.
Or are you asking, is he owl ready, or are you asking, is he likely to be on a team?
I mean, even the owl readiness, honestly, I mean, without knowing, I feel like if you see how talent now has to be distilled down because everyone is just running one tank. For instance, I'm not convinced that someone like Space would find a slot next year.
Sure.
Like I feel like we have to readjust what the bar is and realize even Gig will probably have a challenging situation where unless like too many tank players are willing to take like massive pay cuts and whatnot. But
yeah, but it is very volatile because like I mean it's very volatile. I mean, let's be honest, Silver 3 was in the league. So like if we're like
True.
like if we're talking about like can he play in Overwatch League, Kuffa is miles ahead of who Silver 3 was. Like it's not even close. I would if like we're talking about like can they play in Overwatch League, I don't think like Kuffa can. I definitely think Kuffa can. The question would be, is there a fit? And like we do this, I mean the thing about this, like we kind of talk about this with like visas and stuff. Chinese players go through this a lot. I'm on this podcast, so I have to talk about it. But like, there are Chinese players who I think could probably be in Overwatch League. X-Ray could be in Overwatch League, but where does he go? And like those types of questions are important to like figuring out. Can they be in Overwatch League? Can they be in Overwatch League? Skill-wise, yes. But is it like, are there places for them? Can they get the visa? Those types of things are like extracurricular that we can talk about. But like, it's too. In speaking of just like a mechanical strength-wise, I think you could definitely find a place for Kuffa in the Overwatch.
Keep in mind, probably the worst tank last year was False.
Probably.
Sashin?
No.
Sashin had like a meta like softball to him.
Okay.
False just kind of had to struggle.
But like that's and the bar is ridiculously going to be increased, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I mean Max is coming in, so
Max is coming in. A lot of people like are just like switching teams. I don't think we will see Fearless and Hanbin on the same team anymore. Just so like a lot of spread. I think like being a tank is fucking dire at the moment, right? Depending on how rosters manage there. Because like for some odd reason, it seems to be that they double up more on flex supports than tanks, which I believe is probably...
I blame you.
It's probably wrong. I think that's a mismanagement, I think. I don't know. There's...
I don't hate that personally. There are a lot of metas that Overwatch 2 is kind of geared for, and we've already seen it a few times where you do see a double up of either double main, double flex.
Sure.
We see that a lot already. We've seen the double flex with Sigma comps. We've seen the double flex with some of those defensive holds on vertical maps like Gibraltar. Even going back into the Junker Queen meta where it was like you don't stray away from the standard approach of Lucio Brig ever. We saw double flex and it was actually a hard counter in certain maps where you have spacing to play with. I think there's a lot of opportunity for mixing and matching, although I think from a management perspective, I think you are right that doubling up just to cover those bases and having something like 3 or even 4 supports, it gets a little bit difficult to juggle all of that.
Sure.
Especially when you probably really should have 2 tanks on roster that can cover all the tanks as kind of specialists as we kind of got into everything back in even season 1. But yeah, I do think there's something at least to covering your bases, to making sure that you have the ability to have double flex, double main, because that actually is a thing that we see a lot already in Overwatch 2.
100%.
I feel like I observed more teams improving significantly when they switched to their second tank. I would say the reason why Dallas Fuel was able to win this season is because they had Fearless. I don't think they win it with Hanbin. I think the reason that Mickey was probably a very good pickup for them, in comparatively speaking. I wonder if they struggle more if Kulush is not there. I think if Glads had switched or realized sooner that space is the answer for stage 3, then they would have gone further. I think generally speaking, teams that have a backup tank probably just have much more,
Would you agree then that you should just have both?
You should have both, but there will be a lot of 6-man teams.
Yeah. It's just what it sounds like is that there's not a ton of resources for these teams to be able to decide like, I want, a deep support pool and I also need 2 tanks. It sounds more akin to like an either or scenario where it's like, okay, which which would I prefer, having like an entire tank pool to pick from, or like the flexibility to like do a Lucio Brig or to do like a Babzen? And it's just like it would be perfect if everybody had everything, but this one sounds like it's tight.
I would imagine though at some point, like in the near future, not the near future, but 2 years maybe from now, where I think that the idea of flex tank and off tank specialization, I think will slowly start to go away, where it's just like, that's why like Reiner's so good and so valuable, is because Reiner can play everything. Like even depending on what it is, and like I think players like that are going to end up becoming unicorns, where it's like, if you can have this player, then you can fill out the rest of your roster somewhere else because you have faith whatsoever. And even with Reiner, it was like the Junker Queen was still like a problem, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't go to space quickly. So I think that at some point, once like we get, now that the game is out and now that players can grind all the time, like I think, speaking of like grinding, someone who did the reverse of like going from like flex tank to off tank, Icy, I think, was someone during Contenders at least who like was the soul tank mostly for Pirates and Pajamas. And Heurix mentioned this on broadcast that like Icy worked really hard to like play main tank and grinded a lot. And I think like if you can get players like that who like have that mindset to like play everything and not just specialize in the main tank, I think that that's actually going to be very valuable to teams going forward. Because I think at some point we will just switch over to it being just like, you're a tank player, you can play everything.
Okay.
Just a matter of time.
Here's a super inflammatory way to ask this question. You ready?
Love that. Let's get us canceled.
Is Icy good enough for his tweets?
For his tweets?
Yes.
I don't know.
I mean, he's constantly involved in every single like minuscule Contenders drama, and it's like always on top of like making sure that there's one Icy tweet on every single subject. And then like sometimes
are you calling Icy a reply guy?
Sometimes soft leaking
Icy
shit.
Or iced?
Yeah, are you saying Icy or Ice?
Icy.
Are you sure?
Am I? Wait, I might be confusing.
I think you maybe.
I might. Yeah,
Icy,
I might be.
That's not Icy.
Right.
I don't think.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I might be confusing him. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So.
Are we allowed to? And I personally love Ice a lot, but he'll be the first person to laugh at this when I say it. Is Ice even a Contenders player? Is he even allowed to be talked about in this? And you know what I mean? At this point, he comes in, he does interviews, he doesn't play. What's going on?
Right.
He's the face.
He's the scout. He's the scout. He's the head scout.
He's the Odyssey team mascot at this point. I think we asked him that in one interview. I can't remember. It might have actually been.
It was grand finals
for B-sides. Odyssey won, and they brought in Ice to do the interview, and he was like playing ranked, and they brought him in, and he they were like, "Hey, you want to come do this interview?" And he's like doing something else. He's like, "I guess." I came in, had no idea what was going on. And we were like, why are you even here? He's like, oh no, just for a good time. All right, man. But yeah, he definitely has his opinions on Twitter.
He also had his Joker moment, if you're being honest, right? Like we all know what we're talking about, but yeah.
But yeah, that's not Icy. Icy is a different breed entirely, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, you were mentioning it, and I was like, I have no idea what you're
talking
about.
This does not sound like
Icy. This does not sound like Icy at all to me.
Yeah, no, like it's iced, yeah, for sure.
So, Timeless, Heurix.
Yeah.
There's a main support on this team that you seem pretty high on. Donghun.
Oh yeah.
Are we buying or are we selling?
Stocks.
I'm buying. I'm still buying in. I'm telling everybody to buy in. Him, Arrow, I'm buying. I mean, I think with Donghun specifically, I think a lot of people are starting to kind of get in tune with like the Arrow hype. Everybody's kind of figuring out like, oh, okay, there's something to this. I think Donghun is like very much it's like just kind of starting, because he was for a long time mostly a ranked player, very like mechanic driven, I would say, to a large degree. And he didn't really pop up on my radar personally until this past, like right in early summer. He started showing up to some of these like pug matches, and circus lobbies as well, which if you don't know what that is, I'm not explaining it. It's going to take too long. So, so he was popping up in those. I was kind of given the reins to kind of spectate a lot of those early on, and kind of sit in and kind of help, figuring out what that kind of stuff looks like from like a spectator perspective. And I mean, because of that, just got to watch, and
Sure.
I started watching this. I want to say kid. I mean, technically, I guess to me at this stage it is, but I started watching him, and oh my god, I have never seen someone do the things that he can do on a Lucio since like maybe like I brought this up on Plat Chat, and I'm still like I know the reactions I'm gonna get when I say this out loud. But I genuinely think, like, from a mechanical perspective, the only player that I can think of to compare his mechanics is Funny Astro on Lucio. I mean, I watched him go into a bunch of, like, it was a team comprised of Overwatch League players and Contenders players, and he made them look like clowns. Like, went in on, it was Colosseo, I remember specifically, went in after a fight had been diced, like it was done, everybody was resetting, and he wanted to go ahead and he wanted to stall cart so it didn't hit neutral, so they maintained forward, like they maintained the forward respawns.
Yeah.
So he went in solo 1v5, played around in the cart, got a kill, and then got out. And then his team reset and they went in with the bot like at neutral, like right before neutral. And I was blown away. My jaw was on the floor. I was in comms with some other people who were also watching the same game, and I was like streaming it to them. And it was Contenders players, Contenders coaches that were watching my stream while I was watching him, and everybody's jaws were just on the floor. Like, it was incredible, and he does stuff like that constantly. I think we have heard from interviews that it's like, okay, this is like still he's maybe to a degree a raw talent because he's still coming in, some of his first experience in Contenders, and his first tournament series I believe was with Sheer Cold, and that didn't really go I think as well as he would have liked, obviously, given their performance in Summer Series. But overall, this is someone I'm extremely high on. Mechanical perspective, I think he's like through the roof. Everything else, if that gets figured out, if everything else gets molded well, I think could be one of the best talents, like genuinely one of the best talents to come out of Contenders in a while.
Some high praise.
Super hard worker too. Like I remember Kuffa and Cal told us that like Donghun plays like a ton of ranked, like a ton, like, and is always like looking to improve and looking to see if they can like get better, which I think is like, he's what, 16 I believe now.
Yeah,
so he's got like he's got a lot more time, so he is like a relatively green to an extent, but like if he's already doing what like Heurix is talking about and he's already got the work ethic that he has, I think definitely like probably like 2 years from now, come when like we do get to like that season of Overwatch League,
it wouldn't be next year, it would be the year after, because he has like February birthday or something like that. It's really early,
so he can't. So when we get to that point, like that's when, like, I mean, the sky might be the limit for this player if everything like aligns obviously with like metas and stuff like that, and like we get to this point. But like if we continue with Donghun in this way, I think like Heurix is absolutely right that he's someone to keep an eye out for, like going forward,
there is one,
like one of the best talents.
There is one caveat to this. I have only seen like pretty much one hero from him.
So
that's fair. There is that one caveat, and that's a pretty big asterisk, I would say.
Yeah.
That it is one here. I don't really know what his Mercy looks like. I don't really know what his Brig looks like all that much. I've seen a couple of looks into it. I've seen a couple of looks at his BAP. But like in depth, I've really only studied his Lucio, and his Lucio is incredible. If his other heroes can be even half as good as his Lucio, he'll have no problem making the league when he turns 18.
All right, Kenobi, I'm gonna make you Max Kellerman for a moment. Okay?
No, why him? Why him? I want Iguodala.
Yeah. Sadly, Iguodala does not play in the Overwatch League. He's too busy getting racks. Gun to head, fate of the universe on the line. Who, much like Heurix has, put his pony on Donghun, who is your player that's not named Tree that,
Okay,
you're
I was gonna say,
excited.
I was like, can I just take the gun from you? Like, this is easy.
No, it can't be Tree, not Tree.
Okay, not
I've heard enough about Tree. I get it. He's crazy. I've seen it. He is crazy. He's also 15. It's gonna be a minute.
Easy,
It's a while.
Okay,
This is still so easy though.
For Kenobi? Well, if you've got a name, I'll double back to you. Kenobi.
Does it have to be someone? Does it have to be someone who's like in the lead? Or
No, just somebody who hasn't necessarily gotten the limelight that you think they deserve. The expectations.
Squid.
Okay.
I think Squid from Pirates and Pajamas is like, I think kind of in the same realm as like how we talk about Donghun, where I think Squid mechanically, I think he's played like a little bit competitively, but not
played
that
in
much.
Trials a couple of years ago.
Played in Trials like in 2020, I believe, but like now is like came into Pirates and Pajamas this season and was disgusting on Kiriko. I think probably besides CJ, and even then I'm like, I think Squid was probably one of the most mechanically gifted Kirikos we had, and also just had very good game sense. I think they used like in terms of like Suzu usage, and Kiriko's a hero where you have to have good game knowledge to get the best out of that hero. And Squid was someone who I think did that really consistently throughout this tournament. And that would be someone who I would be like, keep an eye out on this player because they are relatively unknown. They have, have had prior previous experience, but like Squid was someone who I think caught a lot of the NA team in terms of casters off guard as being like, this guy's like really good and like has a lot of potential as being a star player. So I think that for me, gun to head,
Fate of the Universe on the line?
Fate of the Universe online. I want Squid. I want Squid.
Heurix, does that line up? Or do you have another name?
I had a different name when I had like a kind of similar discussion on Plat Chat. I think my name changed from then. One of the names that I did bring up was Rymazing.
Yes, it's on my list. I was going to ask about Rymazing.
That is the Heurix special right there.
Yeah, the Donghun Rymazing back to back.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where I sit with Rymazing right now, to be perfectly honest. And I'm sorry, Rymazing, if you're watching this. I'm just not sure where I sit because a lot of that banks on the Sojourn, where he was just like dominating lobbies for the better part of Summer Series. Yeah. Door and Kenobi have affectionately named him the Soul Collector. I'm not sure if that holds still, but yeah, I think a lot of the other talent that is in the Contenders has caught up and maybe even I think surpassed Rymazing Sojourn just 1-to-1. It's hard to say that because obviously team dynamics come into play, and it's like how much of that is Rymazing versus his mirror, versus whatever. But yeah, I would say that was my answer. Now I don't know about that. I think Squid's a good look. Squid also interestingly was I believe a DPS player at 1.2 a couple years back.
Checks out.
But
they played Kiriko.
It's really hard to say one player. I think I'm kind of scanning through right now. I'm doing a little bit of cheating. I'm just scanning through to see if there's anybody that I think like, okay, that person just needs way more
that's
looks.
Not Tree.
That isn't Tree, and I'm not allowed to go with Arrow. That's not allowed.
Arrow would be the other one.
I mean, definitely very impressive and a name that I've heard thrown around, but I would challenge you to go a little bit further.
Okay, I mean, if I go one step further than that, then I'm going probably Vision.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say from Redbirds.
That's fair.
Because everybody at this point probably knows Lethal, and I'm not leaking anything. I just wouldn't be surprised if Lethal is just like already in contract negotiations with the team at this point. I mean,
the scouts got to be doing their job, like Kurt.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, if Lethal isn't just like either A on a team or B already in talks to be on a team, then I don't know what the hell is going on. But Vision has come in, and he's a little bit newer of a name. Some people know him as Vision or Vision Live. And I call him the Clutch King personally. There were a lot of moments on specifically New Queen Street where for some reason, once that overtime wick starts going down, Vision like plugs in notepad.exe and he just starts only clicking heads. And we've seen some insane turns from Redbirds where they're down like 50 meters on New Queen Street. and they win like 4 fights in a row because Vision 4Ks and like only hits headshots. Like ult or no ult. It doesn't matter. And dude went insane. He was incredible on the Reaper as well when they did that swap and run it back.
His Hanzo is
his Hanzo has been great. As like a sniper player, he's generally regarded as one of the better ones there, which I think is something that we don't have as much of right now in NA. EU has a few sniper players that are like disgusting. But we don't have as much of that right now in NA. We have a lot of like tracers, and we have a lot of like Genjis,
projectile,
and some Sojourns and stuff like that. But Vision is a talent that I think more people need to have their eyes on at the moment.
All right, definitely heard the stirrings of the Clutch King doing some crazy wickery, doing some crazy clutching ups. Do you think this is like a kind of a gadget player, like somebody that you would like use to fill out a lineup? Maybe not necessarily the core, member, maybe not a starter, but
super valuable to Redbirds as like a starter. And I think that they don't get as far if he's just like a gadget player. I think that the fact that he can like flex a little bit to like other things. I mean, the Reaper is something like, obviously it's not the flashiest hero, and kind of the meme about Reaper is that like anyone can play Reaper, right? It's like anyone can really
Reaper, LOL.
Yeah, just play Reaper, LOL. But the way Vision like thought about the game playing Reaper, I think was like the biggest quality. Like my man would like, specifically against like Kitsune Rush, I think the one thing that he would do, and he did this multiple times, where he would sit like and wait for Kitsune Rushes and then Death Blossom on top of them, and he's not getting kills potentially, but what
he's just kind of pushing him out.
He's just pushing him out of Kitsune Rush, and you can't really get value, and then you Wraith out. Like stuff like that, like those tiny micro things, I think is indicative of like a very smart and very gifted player. And so I think Vision, with what we've seen from him mechanically, is just like raw mechanics. Definitely, I think probably should potentially be in Overwatch League. I think that you can find a place for him. I think that DPS line, I think now it would be, unless people would get mad at us if we didn't say it was like the best DPS line that we had in Contenders. But I think like between Lethal and Vision, that dynamic was very good. I think they can probably go other places and don't necessarily need to like be brought up as a duo. But I think Heurix is right that like Vision would be someone who I think that if you are going to look for like a player who can kind of come out of nowhere and just be someone who has the potential to carry a team and be a starter. I think if we hit like a Hanzo meta and like you want to have like a third DPS, then like Vision, I think very good in that regard. But I think he could definitely start.
Just start. Okay. All right. I don't know if at this point we can still rep him as an NA player, but I know Heurix has been high on Simple for let me check the old watch, hot minute now. Any thoughts there? Are you still selling? Oh, I guess not selling, but are you peddling Simple stocks?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to count him as NA,
I mean that's up to you guys. You guys are the experts.
I mean, he was like his. The problem is like when he was in NA, at least this year, like previous years he was. Previous years he was on like other. It was like Brig mostly, which is like it's not. I think when you look at Simple, it's like the Zen and the Ana would be like the two things that. And Heurix can, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. That's like what mostly Simple was known for, like beforehand, in NA, where when he was up on our Uprising Academy, where this was like Brig. He had some pretty good Brig plays. Like I think that it wasn't like a detriment to the team, but like Brig again is like kind of one of those heroes where it's like not as flashy as the Ana or the Zen. And then I think he went to, I forget what the team was. He on like Starlight, I think, in like Korea?
I think it's like ST Starlight is the full name.
He's on some other team, and I didn't really follow Korea too much, but from what I saw and like from what I saw from him in Summer Series, I was like, yeah, this is good. It's not like his bread and butter of like the Ana and the Zen, but like the Brig did its job well enough for Uprising Academy to be relatively successful.
One of the things I always say about Simple that made me, for lack of a better term, just like fall in love with him as a player. We already know what he's capable of, like just in the game. We've seen it like so much on Uprising Academy. We've seen it so much on all the other teams that he's been a part of. Still kind of weird we're talking about him because he's
He's just not an NA player anymore.
A Korean player playing in Korea.
Listen,
right
I
now,
couldn't
but-
have Heurix on the show about Simple. Okay? I feel like I'm
enough.
doing
We got through simple and amazing. We covered our bases.
Fair enough. Let it be known that I didn't create the docket or anything that we had to go through. It wasn't. I didn't bring any of this up. But yeah, Simple. The thing that I do love about Simple is he has that kind of. He has kind of what Iris has, if that makes any sense. If anybody knows what goes on like behind the scenes and how these players kind of mesh with other people, Iris had this thing on like TI where everybody had way more fun when he was around. Like genuinely way more fun. And I know that this seems like, oh, this is bullshit. Like, who cares? That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, Yiska. Quit rolling your eyes.
And in reality, it actually adds a lot. And Simple is someone that elevates the morale on the team. And this is probably a better way to phrase it, where maybe Yiska can get behind it. That morale actually does actually lend to your ability to get some wins sometimes.
Sure.
Simple is a major factor in that regard as well. Another player that back in the mock tryouts that John hosted, another shout out to John, that he stood out in a big way, not just because he was dominant in his gameplay, but also because when you sit in and you listen to the comms and how everybody's communicating, he actually can communicate well enough in English, like pretty well, that he can, do like a bilingual team, which would be ideal, I think. Or he could do obviously just Korean. That would also be fine. But everybody loved him, like loved him, playing with him. Everybody wanted to be on his team. He stuck around and like hung out with everybody after. The coaches typically would have all their notes and everything, and they would go over them, one-on-one. And actually, Simple would stick around, and he would kind of chat with everybody and just have like a good time. Like that's something that I think goes underappreciated when someone like just genuinely is like there to enjoy themselves and really loves what they do, because that passion is sometimes hard to find right now at the league level. And it's something that can hold a player back if they don't have it anymore. Simple has that in spades, I think. So I look forward to the day that Simple is in the Overwatch League. I think it's a win, not if situation for him.
Here's how I would say this. And this is theory of everything. And what I realized is not only is it like the ways people see the game different, very different. So if we're talking about, for instance, we had Deepay on, and Deepay said like 95% of our season is roster building, 85 to 95. And then like Gunba is like, nah, it's more like 70. And now I talk to Get Amazed and it's like 60, right? And then the same thing is like, one coach says, I don't care about like the internals unless in terms of like, are they friends or whatnot? It's all about the skill and whatnot. I will say all of those people can be right at the same time.
Oh, for sure.
It's absolutely
I agree,
possible for these people to all be right. And for Deepay to be right to say that most of it is roster building, because dynamics work differently at different ends of the distribution of wins. Yeah. Wins change everything, right? Like that's also the theory of like Christopher, who once said like, maybe you should just let your team scrim some contender scrims just to get some wins in, so they're not as depressed about constantly getting fucking dick down, right? Like it's so I think like if you're telling me, okay, someone like Simple, like that type of attitude is good. I agree that this is a huge boon if you put him in a team that's outside the top 3, right? Like where you have to actually like live with more than 2 losses a season, and like have someone to pick up the situation. And this is the difference, I think, like this type of internal morale between like a London who will lose matches, but then have the internals, right? The team structure to not get destroyed, and like inflammatory, and Atlanta, who it was a team that could have absolutely rode the wave, like had 3 losses maybe all season against like some banger teams. They never get a problem internally, and it's all fine and dandy, right? Or they can end at the lower end of the distribution, and it's harder for them to come back. Right. And then you have teams that almost have given up to a point of like, it doesn't really matter. We're losing anyway, right? That's also bad, right? So the level of caring and like, I wouldn't discard like all of those intangibles. You just got to apply them to the right context, and then they can be efficacious, right?
100%. No, I totally agree. I think mostly just taking shots across the bow, poking fun. Sure. But I think there is
going to be worse than Atlanta.
I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see this AT core. I've been sold my stocks. I'm all in. I think I'm safe in my.
People didn't buy in on the NA stocks when they were real low.
Yeah. They were pretty cheap, and I liked what I saw.
You could have gotten a steal.
Man.
I don't know why you wouldn't flip that. That's just. Like,
I still remember you guys doing those like
mock
rookie
drafts.
Mock drafts. Hey, don't forget those conversations I had with you.
That's true,
Joe. I'm telling you, man. There were some people y'all were leaving out, and what do you know?
Like who?
What do you know?
Like who?
Yeah, which one of you guys didn't put someone
I think
in your
both.
fucking,
I think both times.
No, we did.
Is that true?
Yeah, we had someone in for sure.
Okay.
Did we? I think the first one nobody wanted to take someone, and we just had to.
I was unbelievably high on someone.
Yes.
I was. Yeah. I was insanely high. I even tweeted about it, and I don't tweet, so.
I will say, like, Kellen still hurts me. Like, he was in one round we did.
Sure.
He was my first round pick.
Yeah, I think you got him first. Yeah.
Hey, you can't win them all. Can't win
the
them
second
all,
time around.
You also drafted a Prita, and then.
I mean, oof.
Listen, my rookie team stays feasting. You just pull duds. That's all I'm saying. Homie didn't even play. Shout out to Alpha E. That's all I'm saying. Took him twice. Wouldn't think twice.
I think it's going to be a similar thing this next year too. I think there's going to be a lot. Well, there's potential for there to be a good number of NA and EU rookies again, and a lot of them are going to fly under the radar, and people are going to be wildly surprised when, oh no, what do you know? They're good. Maybe a little bit less EU rookies.
Who could have seen that coming?
Outside of a couple of teams for obvious reasons, but yeah.
I mean, Eric, I'm gonna peek behind the curtain for a moment. If there's a thirst for rookie fantasy draft and if the people want it, we need to know. And Heurix and Kenobi can be on. We were going to have it last year. Things kind of fell through the cracks. That's nobody's fault. But, if people want the fantasy draft, they have to, like and subscribe and leave a comment and maybe download the podcast. That's all I'm saying. If they want that, we can make it happen.
Oh, this is the list from yes. Oof.
Feasting, Alpha E, Reiner, Vigilante, OG, and Pineapple.
I really thought I was winning with this one.
Yeah, I know you did. You did. And so did the audience. Apparently everybody voted you as well. I think you won the award. Shout out.
I think Kellen one is looking ripe right now. That is an unlucky right there.
To be fair, Reinforce also like so.
I think there's I mean, again, audio and video listeners probably are completely confused reviewing some of the rookie draft stuff. But I think for Reinforce in particular, I think the
who actually won? Did Avril win?
I think Avril,
we left it
now by virtue of hindsight.
Yes.
I think you would have to say Avril won.
Probably.
With us, just for audio listeners, and like also since we can't bring it up, Avril drafted Stalker, Kalush, MN3, Chio, and Irony.
Yeah, that's a winning combination right there.
Yeah,
pretty good.
Shout out to Joe for getting Pineapple at 19.
Keep in mind we were not allowed to pick proper, right? Like that was
yes.
Yeah,
improper.
So what would you do this next year? Who are you not allowed to pick next year?
T-Sang probably.
No,
there's definitely two names that come to mind.
Right. I mean,
T-Sang and Max are like the two that you just can't pick. Probably.
And I feel like they're not remotely close to what proper was.
I think
Yeah.
that just by like factor of there being two of them, I think it's already like, okay, well, if you take one, then I take the other.
Oh
and
well,
we
I mean,
play it out from there.
then the other two people just get hosed because they're just.
I found screenshots from like Overwatch League coaches telling me in 2019 that Proper was the best player they've ever seen and that he was the best player in Korean Contenders. 2019.
Yeah, it was a long time.
when
ago.
we're still playing goats.
That was so nasty. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
they
shit
didn't
would
call
make
and a
never
half.
Gauntlet. Yeah, but they didn't make Gauntlet in 2020. L
L ratio Sieve.
L ratio Team CC pilled.
True. Kenobi, I'm gonna stick with you for a moment. I know you're a collegiate lad, and somebody that I remember seeing, I want to say running through the national championships was somebody from High Five. Give me an update on Boat.
Oh, Boat was.
What's up? What's Boat doing? Is Boat still good?
Boat's
You like Boat?
Boat's like mini clutch god, I think is
Okay.
like how I would describe it. Northwood had a tendency to just like during, and Heurix was there. Northwood had this like weird tendency to just do like be the most confident team in the world. We even memed it's like Dynasty's the most confident man playing Overwatch right now.
Okay.
And they would sometimes just like out of nowhere snap their fingers and like it's just clutch flights between Bo and Dynasty. It was just crazy how they were able to just completely turn fights on their head. I like Boat a lot on in contenders. I don't think had as much success as they've had in collegiate. The competition in contenders, especially at that role, I think is like much higher all around. But I think Boat's still looking like pretty good. I think he probably needs a little bit more time in the oven in terms of like being in like contenders and collegiate. But I do like Boat in terms of like being a player to look out for in collegiate specifically.
Okay. So maybe somebody, as talent filters up out of any contenders, maybe somebody to kind of watch as they filter up through the rung of NA contenders, and maybe, would it surprise you to see, on a Redbird, on an Odyssey,
something
on
similar
some
happened to like
teams?
Landon, right? Because Landon was kind of like behind a little bit, like UV, because UV was just like the kind of king in NA contenders at the time, but Landon was still very good in collegiate.
Sure.
And, actually, I think Landon had most of his success in collegiate more so than anything. I think he was. Heurix, correct me if I'm wrong. I think he still played in contenders a little bit during that time, but I think most of it was like he was mostly successful like coming in from like contender or from collegiate like, specifically in his Northwood stuff.
Yeah, he played with Ardour still a few times. But yeah, I think that's pretty fair because it wasn't just Landon that was behind UV, because you still had CJ and stuff like that, and I think that's kind of where Boat falls, where it's not like, oh, if one player goes, then Boat's like next up. I think there's a collection of players, and Boat's just amongst them.
Yes.
That's where I have him.
All right. Is there anybody you feel is left on the table that you would want to talk about before we get into some shenanigans? Anybody left that you think deserves a spotlight?
We did talk about Strider, probably the best Hammond we had. Granted, Hammond
is a Hammond player.
Didn't really have a lot of Hammond,
some of the best Roadhog stats we have actually as well too, because he played it one map.
Okay.
And kind of shit stomped with it, and then we never saw it again.
So speaking of Hog, Avani was fucking disgusting on Hog, but like that was one play. Like that Hog play was like my man tippered like every single hook he had. Fucking unreal how good that Hog play was from Avani. Besides that, I'm not sure if like we've covered a lot of the teams so far, and there's I'm not sure if there's anyone that I don't know if Heurix is anyone else, but like
I mean, there's definitely other players. It's just once we start getting into some of those players, there's like a half dozen other players we have to bring up as well, because there's generally I think that depending on what the outlook of next year looks like, there are going to be some players that we could talk about right now that do wind up making it to the league, and some of them may pan out, some of them may not. But I think there are some realities in which there are some players that we haven't really fully discussed that could get opportunities. But again, it just I I mean, you got another half hour for us
Sure.
to go
Yeah.
into
Yeah,
all
I
that
mean,
kind of
that's-
thing. You
It
know
that's
was
what I
true.
mean?
very,
That's true.
it was very competitive, like in like beyond like the top, like the big four, quote unquote, where it was like in those like other teams, like your Knickses, your I think, what was it? Yeah, I think played in NA
Even within
for-
the top four, there's a
yeah.
couple players we haven't really talked about
Yeah.
all too much. I mean,
We didn't talk about Wisp. I think Wisp deserves a lot of like some of their players deserve credit as well. So
I mean, like
there is
Haven, Cyrus,
Haven too.
we didn't really talk about as much. Zira, we didn't talk about as much. Those are all players that, like, hey, depending on circumstances,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
you
age.
could- yeah, and yeah, everything going right. There's some opportunities there. I think maybe even as early as next year where
Mhm.
you could see them in the league and they could pan out. You never know. I think a lot of people didn't have a lot of faith in even players like Sam,
Sure.
but
Well, solid.
Yeah.
All right, shenanigan time. We'll start with Heurix. Only rule to this game: you can't double up on the team. It has to be 5 separate teams. We'll do 5 separate teams. One
Okay.
player from each team create an all-star team. Go.
from NA contenders.
NA contenders only. One player from each.
Are we
individual
only
team.
allowed to use run it back teams?
Yes, the most
Okay.
recent tournament. Run it back.
Oh, that's just making
That's
things so
hard.
difficult.
Yeah, that's really hard.
Okay.
All right, we'll
I'm
put Tree in
doing-
there.
Yeah, I'm doing well. That's even difficult because I think you could just as easily say CJ from Odyssey, but I'm gonna go Tree from Odyssey.
Okay.
He's playing my flex DPS. I'm taking Lethal from Redbirds.
Okay.
He's playing my whatever the hell he wants to play. I'm gonna take. Ooh, this is maybe where things are gonna get weird.
Okay. Get weird with me.
Because I think if you were going down the pipeline of like, okay, let me take like the best players from the best performing teams. If I was going Pip, I would say personally my top player on that team is probably Lep,
Okay.
but I'm taking Squid.
Okay.
My
I know that's
guy.
weird. I know that I
No.
already know he's like a Kiriko play. I'm gonna have to pull out of that one. I'm gonna pull out of that one because it's like I need to see more than he's insane at the
sure.
Kiriko, but I maybe need to see more than that. But it's like, where do I go from there though? That's a tough call because I could go
Could go
left
Icy.
there.
Could go Icy.
I do still need a tank,
Mhm.
but like Kuffa's right there. I could grab Kuffa.
Sure.
I can't grab Arrow. I could grab Donghun. This is almost impossibly difficult. Just because it's like one from each team.
Yes.
So I've got Tree and I've got Lethal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take. I feel like Lep shouldn't even be a part of it because he's like kind of already Owl,
Sure.
and he
I
like played
guess.
one. He played like one contender season in the off season. Not sure if that counts. I'm gonna take Donghun from Timeless.
Okay.
So that gives me a main support and both my DPS, and I need a
Yep.
flex. I need
Flex support and a tank.
and a
Yep.
tank. This is tough. The flex supports and the tanks I want are on teams. Okay. I'm going to. Oh, this is just so difficult. This is so hard. There's definitely some decent options still.
Mm-hmm.
I think I didn't take anybody from Pip, so
Yeah, Pip is still up.
I think I'm gonna take Icy.
Okay.
But there are a lot of good tanks still left to pick from. Like I think Matt Merc, Cowman, all good. Strider you could take. Avani could be like an interesting way to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I just need a flex support now.
Yes.
Simple.
So yeah,
Well, I can't because he's
this would be so much
Technically.
easier if we could. This would be so much
If you let me
easier
pick
if we could
simple.
just fucking.
I'll have the best team of all time. And it's like I would be down for either fish cake or paintbrush, but neither of them are really a flex
Yeah, you're not
support
really
player.
flexing
Right.
on that one.
And it's like I like momentum, but again, same situation. Kind of just a a main tank. I like Haley, but again, or sorry, main support. Again, main support. Oh, this gets real tough. I feel like since I'm locked out of all my teams and I still need a flex support, it's got to be between Fix and Neb, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Neb is autonomous enough, I think, with his hero pool to probably be considered like that.
Yeah, I mean Neb is like, I think, yeah, I think I have to go with Fix.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, that one I think you could go in like 75,000 different directions.
Sure.
Lock it in.
But I think that's my team. I think it's Tree, Lethal, Icy, Donghun, Fix. I think.
All right.
Fuck it.
Kenobi?
We'll lock it in.
Okay, I'll for the sake of like being
no sakes.
No. So I mean, okay, then I'm gonna take Tree.
Yeah.
I don't. Okay, I'm gonna take Tree. To spice it up, I'm gonna take Gig.
Okay.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
I'll take Gig. I will take Squid.
Okay.
Actually, I can just get okay. Yeah, okay. I'll take okay. Tree, Gig, Squid, Arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then
that's a good team already.
I need a main support, don't I?
Luckily, you have like 85 options because
yeah. I mean, it's either I'm thinking either Neb or Yamitra as like. I also thought Paintbrush was like pretty okay this season.
Yeah, Paintbrush is good.
I'll lock it in with Yamitra. So it's Tree, Gig, Squid, Arrow, Yamitra. That's my team.
All right. Yiska.
And then Coach Empress.
Coach Empress.
Based.
Already Owl can't do it.
Yeah. Tough call.
Also, I don't think was Empress like officially on an NA team.
Yeah, it was on. Well, Tree
officially.
Okay. I don't know about it. I don't know about officially, but Tree after every summer series would say that
she
like
was actually.
Yeah.
I know she helped. I don't think people realize this, but she helped almost every fucking team in NA and
really?
a couple in.
I didn't know that. Okay. I remember
she
Tree
was
saying it a lot.
Incredible with everybody and tier 2. She always kind of like jumped in and helped people individually that she had worked with on previous teams and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Took time out of her day to like do that. That's why a lot of people hold her in very high esteem because she goes out of her way to go above and beyond. But yeah, I didn't know because there's a lot of teams that she has helped that she isn't like officially listed as a coach for. Yeah. I know Odyssey was traditionally the one she was always listed for amongst the EU teams that she did with the Ultimates and what was it, Falcons? I think
Falcons.
She was listed as for those, but yeah. Anyways.
All right, Yiska, you feel plugged in? You feel up to date with the NA?
Sure.
Good.
I feel like we talked at Yiska for like I don't know how much he's soaked.
I mean,
up.
to be fair, like I feel
Gig
like
you checked out after the Gig conversation
for a long time. Like I thought there was going to be probably a lot of Contenders NA talent that would be promoted. Unfortunately, the APAC situation has completely shifted incentive structures for a lot of teams, right? Because like if you can get like an S tier player at min, I'm sorry, right?
NA, I mean, NA is also really young though. I think it's like kind of the other thing about it. Like, a lot of the players that we've talked about are like we've talked about some that would be like eligible, like Cjay, for instance, but like a lot of that Odyssey core is like 16. They're not, so it's kind of like a restructuring almost of like where we get these players from. Because I mean, last season rather, it was like, yeah, let's just get AT, and then like there were some other really good players from NA in particular. But now it's just kind of like we have to wait a little bit and be patient for those players that like we until we get that like big wave.
Mm-hmm. Listen, all I'm hearing is that little German boy is a little upset that USA is going to clear them in the World Cup. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, they very well might. It's not like
I think that's an
Stupid
extreme
competition.
likelihood.
Yeah. What is the German team even? I don't know.
I mean, Hottie's in the league, so
Hottie,
I mean,
yeah.
depending on the rule set, it's tough, right?
Yeah.
God bless. But with the World Cup, hopefully by the time the audience hears this, hopefully we'll have a better idea of what our free agency window looks like, or maybe we won't. We'll have to wait and see. You'll know if you're listening to this. You'll know better than us. But as long as that's said and done, I think that's going to be 275. I want to give a special thank you to both Heurix and Kenobi for joining us. Heurix, we'll start with you. What's up? What's going on in your life? Where can people find you? What are you doing?
Yeah, pretty much just in between stuff with Contenders right now. We just finished up Run It Back, just did Homecoming. Kenobi also doing the same stuff, so he'll probably parrot the same exact thing that I'm doing right now. But we tend to do a lot of stuff together. It's nice having some good friends to do what you love to do alongside you. But yeah, at CT Heurix, I'm working on at Heurix, but Elon isn't hooking me up, man. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, at CT Heurix, you can find me on Twitter. I'm very bad at socials. It's to the detriment of my career. But yeah, Twitter is pretty much it. I don't do Instagram. I don't do yeah, that's it. Yep.
Fair enough. Nobes?
Yeah, I'm gonna parrot the same thing that Eric said. We just finished out Homecoming and Run It Back. It's again really nice to be on broadcast with Heurix again. I think the last time it was like Chinese Contenders in like 2019. But yeah, I've really enjoyed working on Run It Back this season in NA with Heurix and the rest of the casters that we have. You can find me at Kenobi. At Kenobi Cast. There's no way I'm gonna get at Kenobi ever. Disney will come to my house and break down my walls. In terms of like what I do, I've been writing a few more like story driven pieces. Just on Medium. I will probably have
They've been good.
Thank you. I will probably write one about Redbirds and them doing the double with Collegiate Homecoming and Run It Back winning that. So keep an eye out for that. I will probably get it out sometime after.
After what?
After Christmas.
Oh, okay. You gotta open him presents. You gotta make sure him not get cold.
We're about to lose power here. There's 40-mile-an-hour winds. We are fucked.
Yeah, I've heard that there's supposed to be some sort of like blizzard, weird winter storm. My computer keeps screaming about it. Yiska, how is it? What's going on? Would you like to leak anything now that it's 2:30 a.m. and you're delirious?
I mean, I can say that we talked about players that have handshake agreements today.
Ooh. Handshakers. Any nodders?
Like they have to have handshake agreements because, of course, by this point,
sure, of course, the free agency windows
it's
not open
right.
yet.
I will, I guess it's going to be a little bit darker for the next 2 weeks. If around me, I think I still have probably reports and like maybe a general manager panel that I'm looking to host. But other than that, I'm actually off for 2 weeks, so it's going to be.
Are you going to play more Hunt Showdown? Are you going to Prestige again?
Yeah,
you little sweat lord.
Oh Jesus Christ!
Is your partner going to shoot you in the back of the head?
I heard he was going to jump into some Dark and Darker.
Yeah, I was about to say Darker and Darker.
He keeps trying to sell everybody out. He's a fucking Dark and Darker shill.
Yeah, the thing is, I'm being accused of being just like a Twitch streamer fanboy in terms of like.
Wait, you aren't?
I just like these I see game. I think game looks funny. I suggest game. Now I'm a simp.
Yeah, you don't ever get to criticize the Zoomers in our community with
true
sentences like that. All right. You're just as degenerate as the rest of us. You enjoy having a good time. You spent way too much hours on Super Auto Pets to hold some crazy.
But this is boomer content. I'm watching.
That's not boomer content.
A middle.
You picked the giraffe because it says giraffe.
Yeah, dude. Let's be
Yeah.
honest, Super Auto Pets is definitely fucking Zoomer content.
It's
You are-
not.
you are
You're
off-
wrong.
Yes, it is.
And Dark and Darker isn't either. It's the epitome of like mid-30s. Like a child is screaming in your ear. You're suffering from sleep deprivation gaming. That's what Dark and Darker
if
is.
I buy this game and we're not naked running somebody down with daggers, then I'm gonna be a little upset. That's all I'm saying.
See, like that's the most annoying thing about this game. Is like it seems to have no matchmaking. You're always like queuing as solo into like 3 decked out people, where you're just like, okay, well, I guess.
So it is exactly like Tarkov. Got it. I'm
But
getting
Tarkov-
starting to
I
understand that.
don't have the same experience as him. I go in and I run in without armor and I just bonk people on the head and they die. And that's all there is to it.
I really just extracted like once, and it was only because I got to ambush like a 3v3 and just like stood behind and got the archer and then like could sneak out. That was the only time I can I can I confess? I actually didn't know you can extract with gear. Like I was like, oh yeah, that's just like a
no.
battle royale type thing. Like for at least 5 games until I
You've been
realized
playing on
it was-
hardcore mode for
Apparently.
this entire time.
Yeah, no.
Running and dry.
Yeah, not only can you extract, but you can also use the red ones and go down a floor, and then those like that's even harder.
Okay.
Mm,
And it has like bosses that have only been killed like 4 times.
jeez.
What? Okay. Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Yiska's
Guys-
learning.
See,
I'm
Joe
just
is
This
hooked.
this
Joe-
got derailed pretty hard.
I mean,
That's,
That's the end of
That's
the-
what happens.
that's the
That's
end
what
of the
happens at the
show.
end of this
That's
show.
what it is.
That's what
the
happens.
good news is that this finished, I believe, under 2 hours. And I don't know who you have for EU, but if everybody does their due diligence on EU, then that one is going to be, I mean, bank for about 6 hours on EU.
Yeah, yeah.
There's way too much depth there.
Sure.
I mean, that's definitely a good thing, and we
There's
will
a
be
lot
doing
of
you.
content for EU.
Yeah,
Well,
like I said, bank 6 hours. You're going to
Alright.
need it.
6 it
Yeah,
is.
6
You're
hours
prepared
for
for
0
raid
pickups.
at that point.
6 hours, 0 pickups. I mean, come on. There's definitely some names in there. Definitely some in there.
Yeah, then
But-
we'll get a try block. Yeah.
Whoever gets picked up by justice.
I wouldn't be so sure, dude. Like I saw some crazy
La
stuff.
justice.
Like let's think just like the levels. I'm not saying that particular player is true, right? Just the levels, so we can. Okay, don't clip me out of context, please.
Clip him.
But like, just think a player like Alpha Yi might go for min.
Sure.
That's what you're competing against this season. Are you
Some-
Alpha Yi, you little European boy? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I don't think Joe thinks you are.
You're goddamn right I don't.
See, like,
You didn't think Alpha Yi was as good. I sat here on this podcast and tried to convince you about Alpha Yi, and Joe is the only one who listened.
I mean, I believed he was good, but at the same time, I was still proper pilled. And I will say, in context of that, I'm still correct.
There's nothing in me more that my internal vibes when he tries to compare anybody to proper is that gif of that clown cosplayer that like flicks the top off of the vodka bottle and just downs it. Like, yeah, of course you're proper pilled. You and everybody else and their mother is proper pilled. Okay, let's do a little bit
Yeah,
of.
but
you
I
know,
don't have that bug in the human code where I get bored of that.
You have a bug in the human code that you spam caterpillar comps on a 2D game with that auto battles for you. Okay,
It's pretty good. It's
Giraffe Man. I'm sure it does. Anyways, that's 275. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you too for joining us. We're out of here. See ya. Happy Christmas.